Welcome to the station, Kentucky's conservative outpost. I want to take this moment to explain a little bit about what the show is about and why we call it the station. The station is kind of self-explanatory because we're on a broadcast TV station and a radio station, so we're, and we kind of represent a lot of these values and ideas that we're talking about in these shows. So that kind of means that, but it also means a historical term from Kentucky's past. When the early pioneers came into the state, they were actually coming into the state at a time when there was a lot of danger. There was a lot of warfare going on. There was a battle with the Indians and the British, and we were actually in the Revolutionary War. And so people don't realize this. This state, Kentucky, was settled during the Revolutionary War, 1770, 76, 77, 78. And so when Daniel Boone came into the state and blazed Wilderness Road, one of the first things they did was they built these little things called stations. They were blockhouses. They were places where where people in the community could go and rally and defend themselves from danger. And it was a very important part of our history and part of our polity, part of our politics. And if you look around this city, look around this state, you'll still see hints of that past. Like there's a road over in the East End called Tucker Station Road. Well, there was a Tucker Station at one time. There was a Valley Station. If you live in Valley Station, that's why it's called Valley Station. There was a fort there, and so this station is sort of Kentucky's. This show, we're calling it the station, is sort of a throwback to a reminder of that, of what Kentucky was about, and the politics is kind of an engaging sport on some level, and we need to rally around our values and families and communities. And so come do it at the station here on this show. And Evan, we want to talk about where people can see this besides this broadcast station that you're listening and watching it on. Where else can they see the program and segments?
Right, so Kentucky's Voice is active on social media as well. So we're on virtually all the platforms. You can find us on WBNA, WGTK. We also have accounts for Kentucky's Voice under Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel now, and we have content on all of the platforms, so people should follow us so they can stay up to date with local networks finally representing them. Yes,
exactly right. And we're really interested to hear what you think about this program as well. So please go on our Facebook page or YouTube page, comment, send us some thoughts. We want to start reading some viewer comments in our future programs. Give us some ideas for some shows that we need to do. This show is going to be about school choice and that initiative. And Jim is one of the really one of the nation's experts. I was going to say one of the state's experts. You're really one of the experts in the nation on this topic. So we can't wait to get into it. Well, let's just get into it. School choice. Jim Waters of the Bluegrass Institute. Thanks for being on the show tonight.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. And so, what is school choice? When you hear that term, what does it mean?
You talked about Outpost and how what was happening physically there is happening like policy and politically wise now.
That's right.
We're in this battle of ideas, and there's the idea that government has the solution to everything, and then there's the idea that individuals should have the liberty to make their decisions that are best for them, their children, their families. So really the idea of school choice is really about giving parents opportunity and alternatives. It's about, right now we have just a monopoly when it comes to our education system in large part. And we found in the rest of our society, monopolies don't work. We don't just have one place to buy our groceries, one place to buy our car or clothes or whatever. We have lots of options. And it should be that way in our education system because children are different. They have different needs. And education should be about what's best for the child, funding the child, funding the student, not the systems.
Yeah. Give the parent the choice. Empower the parent. That's
and there are different ways of doing that.
That's right.
So
a good example of this. We have probably we probably have the best, highest higher education system in the world. Right? People come from all over the world to come to our universities, and how's our university system ran? Well, it's a system that's where people pay. And they have funds to themselves. They pay to go to school, so there's school choice built into higher education. Well, and suddenly we have the best
they get financial, the GI Bill and all that.
They get
financial help.
And
yet, when it comes to our K through 12 students, we have all this opposition about providing help for some of the people we're going to talk to, the parent we're going to talk to tonight, and those families who could use that help to better educate their children.
Exactly right. So it's an idea that time has come, and we're going to talk to a couple of good guests tonight about that topic, and just just real quickly, what are the different types of school choice that would be available or being talked about in Kentucky? What are the options that we could
well,
do?
what's going to work best for us here, because of the way our Constitution is set up, is really two major ideas. One is public school choice in the form of charter schools. A charter school is a public school. It's funded publicly, but it's run differently. It's managed. Each school has its own board, its own leadership, its own setup, and they make their decisions there. The principal hires and fires as they need to. They don't have some bureaucracy that's standing in their way. They're doing a great job across the country. And then we have non-public school choice, which is providing education opportunity accounts, or they've been called tax credit scholarships across the country, where people donate to third-party funds, 501c3 nonprofit funds, and families who qualify according to the way the law's written, which here in Kentucky would cover a lot of families. They could apply to get a scholarship to use that to send their children to a private school, parochial school, Christian school, or use it for services that their children need. So
that's really a simple way. It's a very innocuous way. I mean, you're using private money to pay for scholarships of needy families and needy kids. So who would be against that? I don't understand it.
It doesn't come from government.
It doesn't come from government. Now, there are other government other ideas of school choice where you can get government funds to go to the parents. And let me say, I almost hate to use the term government funds.
Well,
these are our tax dollars. It's not the government's money. It's our money.
Yeah, right.
Everybody watching right now, you're paying property taxes. Where do those property taxes go? They go to the school system. So your money is being sent to a school, into a coffers that pays for a school system, and that system feels like they own that money. It's their money. It's not their money. It's your money to begin with. So it should be given to a parent at the end of the day. Let them decide where they want to take their kid and educate them. So that's another way of doing school choice. It's basically a credit or a voucher.
It's a voucher.
It's a voucher system. That's not available in Kentucky yet because of our Constitution.
Yeah, but
correct?
really what we've got set up going on will do the same thing. I think it's even better because it involves individuals and businesses voluntarily helping with school choice and getting a credit against their tax liability to do that.
That's right.
And so why not? What's wrong with giving people a choice?
That's right.
And like you said, and by the way, when people begin to realize, hey, these are our dollars, they're for educating students, not protecting systems, especially failed ones.
Right.
The opponents are afraid of that because that means they lose their control. That's what needs to happen.
That's what needs to happen. We need accountability in that system, and the only way to get really solid accountability is to give parents a choice. I mean, you do have a school board that you could go petition and you could ask them to make some changes, but that doesn't really work. And we've seen how that doesn't work this past year.
And this is such a big system here, Tom. This is one of the biggest school systems in the country. One of the 50 biggest, largest. And I'm not sure that can even happen here.
Exactly right.
I mean, I hope we get some good school board members and so forth, but at the end of the day, it's really empowering parents that's going to cause the system to stand up, pay attention, and make changes.
Grassroots, exactly right. So school choice. So while you're watching the station, and we're going to have some great guests here shortly. So. You're watching the station, Kentucky's Conservative Outpost. Thanks for watching. We have a great program tonight. We're talking about school choice. The election has occurred, it's over, and the issues are what they were. But there's still a major topic that needs to be dealt with in our state and in our community, regardless of who won this election. I think change can be made on this front. School choice. So we have an expert on school choice with us tonight, Jim Waters with the Bluegrass Institute. And also we have a great guest as well we're going to interview. So Jim, I'll hand it over to you and let's talk about school choice.
Well, thanks, Tom. I think that's extremely important that whatever the outcome of the election, Kentucky has been and remains behind other states across the country when it comes to offering educational opportunities and alternatives to parents. And that needs to happen. We need to continue working on this. And we've had two bills pass in the past couple of years. In the 2021 legislative session, we had House Bill 563, which would allow individuals and businesses to contribute to nonprofits, and they would allow those dollars to go into education opportunity accounts, and then those dollars could be used by qualifying families who make up to 175% of the poverty line, which includes a lot of middle class families, over $80,000 for a family of four.
These are private dollars. They could be
right. The government never touches these dollars.
Really? Okay.
Now, what happens is, when individuals contribute these and businesses, they can then apply that contribution against their state tax liability.
I see.
So it's a tax credit.
Yeah.
But government never touches the money, and our opponents have tried to misconstrue how that happens and say that this is taking money away from public schools, but really it's a voluntary program. If that's true, as a matter of fact, then any money you give to your church or your charity or anybody would be taking money, quote unquote, away from public schools. But we've got a great but what happened was there was a lawsuit filed against that bill, and what that bill would have done would have been to allow those accounts to be used for two things. One, for educational services, supplies, for dual credit programs for kids in all 120 counties. But for students in 9 of our counties, the 9 largest counties, those dollars could have been used to go to a non-public school. They could have been used to cover tuition at a non-public school, like a faith-based school.
Right.
The other bill that passed was a charter school funding bill this year. And of course, in that bill, there were 2 mandated pilot programs, one in Jefferson County, one in Northern Kentucky. But our guest tonight, Akia McNeary, has been involved in the fight, I guess we could say, to bring non-public school choice to Kentucky. And Akia, it's great to have you with us. Tell us why you got involved with this. You're a mother, and you had some concerns about your own children, and I know. On one hand, I know you must be disappointed that this got tied up in court and you haven't been able to use this program, but because you were really wanting to do that. But talk also about how important it is that we push on through and get this done.
Well, thank you all for having me.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. I actually got started in the school choice is because my personal testimony, I graduated high school with a 4th grade reading level, and I struggled. And I found out later that it was because the way that I was taught with my learning in high school. I have my 4 school-age children, which all differ from public school, private school, from private to public. So it's I just feel like school isn't a one-size-fits-all for every child. It's basically what fits the needs of your kids at that time. My oldest son, he went to both public and private, and then back to public. My middle son, he has been strictly into the public school setting. My other son, he has been in private, then public, back to private. And my daughter, she is in private school. I just feel like it's time for Kentucky to take a stand and give parents like myself more options when it comes down to choosing what education best fits the needs of their children. Because ultimately, the parent knows what's best for their child at different seasons and different areas in their lives.
Well, Akia, we do have school choice in Kentucky right now. If you have means, if you're wealthy and you have means, you can write that check to a non-public school, a private school, faith-based school, or you can move to a different school district. You can up and move. But that's not possible for many parents. That's why we need to have options to help parents financially. I know you agree with that, right? That we need to have some options. The kids should have access to a great education no matter what their family's income might be. They should be able to have that access.
Absolutely. I do struggle financially to make sure that 2 of my 2 younger kids are in private school. I had to relocate to a smaller unit to make sure that they are able to get the education that they need. But I'm fine with that. But it would have been better if I could have moved to a different neighborhood with a better education system, and/or if the public school was able to accommodate my children for their needs. My son, Nehemiah, he has attention deficit disorder. So a classroom setting of 27 to 30 kids just doesn't work for him. So he needs to be in a smaller classroom setting so that he can be able to get the education that he needs. And that's what is offered at his faith-based faith-based school. It's only 10 kids in his class, and he's in 7th grade. So it's basically one-on-one teaching. Also with my daughter, she has kinesthetic learning. She has, she does textile learning, so the teachers do know what type of learning style, and they try to make sure that they reach her education level on an everyday basis. I'm not saying that the public school could not do that, but I know that just with the classroom sizes being smaller, it's easier for the teachers to make sure that my kids have their needs met as far as education is concerned.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I've met your children. They're great. They're so they were such a delight to be around and to meet. But you bring up a really good point here, and this is really, I think, important in the discussion about school choice is really we want all kinds of options, right? I mean, if a public school works best for a child, that's what that choice ought to be available. Maybe it's a public school in a different district, and that bill did allow some changing of school districts being able to go to a district out of, next door or whatever. But that's really what it's about, is what's best for the child, right? And don't you think
Absolutely.
a lot of education, thinking about education and philosophy and policy, has been so focused on the system rather than what's best for the student, what's best for the child. So we're not saying that public school is good or bad. We're saying that it ought to be whatever's best for the child. If it's a public school, like you said, if it's a smaller private school, smaller classrooms, whatever that child needs to succeed, I just feel like we have to get the attention focused on that.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel that that is where we kind of fall short at when it comes down to making the decision what is best. Like I said, like my kids have gone from public, private, public, or all public. So, but that every kid has a different personality. Every kid have a different learning type. Every kid has a different peer group. Every kid wants to do different athletics, so you should be able to make the choices on, say, hey, when your kids, say, hey, what is it that you want to do? What school would you like to go to when you want to go to college? Because that's the discussion that I'm having with my junior right now. And so we are planning his curriculum based on so that he can get into the college that he desires. And so that makes it, and you have to have those discussions with your kids, so that you can help them make that better choice.
Even in charter schools, which are public schools of choice, of course, but a lot of that same approach we found really was very successful in asking kids, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you're interested in? But we've had a public system that's kind of been a monopoly, and monopolies haven't worked in any other sector of our society. But when it comes to public education, I feel like we're somewhat maybe still stuck in the 1950s and 60s. And instead now kids, we can ask kids, what is it that you want to do? And of course, as the adults, we have to be guiding them. But, I think sometimes there's a fear of doing that. Why do you think that is?
I really don't know. I struggle with that because I know that so many, around us, so many states have school choice, and we're like sitting ducks in the middle that don't have school choice. So I kind of struggle with the why don't we?
Yeah.
So
well, you got involved. You got involved in this. Tell us about your involvement, and we saw each other at the Supreme Court hearing on this lawsuit a couple of weeks ago in Shelbyville. And but tell us kind of your involvement here. You were granted the right to intervene. You were represented by a great attorney from the Institute for Justice, by the way, Ben Fields, and he did a super job in front of the Supreme Court answering some of the things that were being thrown at them. But what was going through your mind about this whole process, about the legal process, and what do you think is missing from this discussion, and how can we push this forward? What are your thoughts on that?
So with the legal process, I feel like Ben did an amazing job. I was very excited on how he pursued the case. And just as far as my involvement, I live in the community where there's low to middle income families. So I get to have these discussions where, oh, this isn't working for your kid. and they want different options. So I am basically boots on the ground, and I hear from people in my community that kids struggle at different schools and they want options. They are afraid to kind of like speak up and don't want to get involved or whatever the case may be. So I do kind of tell some of their stories when I get interviewed, because there's a lot of different unique stories out there, and they want options, but they're too busy trying to provide for their kids. And I'm thankful to God that I have the flexibility that I do have, so that I am able to make sure my kids are off to school and make sure that they are getting everything that they need as far as education is concerned and extracurricular activities. However, I just feel like I would just say that it's a lot of people. It's not just me. It's a lot of people that is in that bracket.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Is there a story, a situation that stands out in your mind that really has moved you and has sort of inspired you in this effort?
So I think it was in December of 2020. It was during COVID. I had decided to get a petition signed. So in my neighborhood, so that my local step rep would know that the people in his community wanted school choice. I didn't know where he was at on the fence, so I was just like, okay, I'm gonna do what I can do. So I went knocking on doors and got 100 petitions signed at the time. And I heard a lot of very unique stories. One in particular, it was a family that primarily spoke French, and he was going to our local high school because his mom wasn't driving at the time. And so he said that he was able to go to a different high school, but he had to get pulled out. But this high school that he was going to, he did very, very well in his academics, but they had a French-speaking courses there. So he did well. So when he transferred to our local public school, which does not have a French class, he is struggling very, very bad. And those are the families like that, I feel that they need to have more options so that they can choose what's best for their kids, Yeah. And he told me, he says, and he'll call me every now and again, and he'll say, has it passed yet? Has it passed yet? I said, no, not yet. We're still working on it. He said, you're going to be my champion. You're going to be my champion. You're going to make sure I go to the right school. And I said, well, no, it'll be a number of us that make sure that you get to the right school. And it's been incidents where I've been at the grocery store. 5th and 6th graders can't count, coins to $1. So there's a lot of, I know that people in position, they feel like that they're doing what's best, but I feel like if they would come to a community such as mine and just put some regular clothes on and see what's actually going on, like just go to the grocery store and see how many kids can count money with nickels, dimes, and quarters to get to $1, and see how many kids that cannot do that. I think it's easier for them to make decisions based off of things that they don't know nothing about. Well, I'm just saying from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, there's so many issues. I know we have to wrap this up, but there's so many issues that parents all have different concerns. Some parents are concerned about different things, and that's the great thing about school choice. It's not limited to one area. I mean, if your school is teaching things in the classroom that you don't agree with, that's reason enough to choose a different school. Or if they're not offering services, let's say you have a learning disabled child, they're not offering the services they need. So there's all kinds of reasons, isn't there? I think that's what makes it really interesting too. Is every parent has their reason for supporting this. Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, oh, it's just for this or it's just for that. It's what's best for your child, because ultimately, as a parent, you know what's best for your kid.
Yeah.
When you have those discussions with them and kind of see where they want to guide their future.
Yeah.
So, Kia, it seems like school choice in general, it does so many great things for the educational system that are so needed. I mean, first, and you all have touched on this in the past interview here, it's just the most important thing it does is it empowers parents. It gives parents the power. First of all, these are your kids. These aren't the government's kids, right? And these are your tax dollars. These aren't the government's tax dollars. And how else do you create accountability in a system that's failing? I mean, they'll say, yeah, well, you have a school board right now in the public school system. You can go petition your school board and see if they'll make changes, and you can vote them in, vote them out. Well, we saw how well that worked in COVID this past year. Parents were calling the school board saying, why are you shut down? My kid is at home. They could be, my kid's wearing a mask. You're making me wear a mask. So that is a very clunky, inefficient system of accountability. This is the ultimate accountability. If you don't like, if the average middle class parent now could have the ability, the funds, the ability to send their kid to any school they want, and that creates accountability in the system
and
that
especially
we've never had
lower
before.
income families,
and lower income
having that
families.
help.
Right, exactly.
And you're absolutely right. It's about empowering parents, and when the system knows that parents are empowered, it acts differently.
It sure
It
does.
responds to that.
That's right.
We know that from other states.
Right now, the system is responding to what the teachers' unions want. Now
In
what the
large
parents
part.
want. Now
And
what
the
parents want.
bureaucracy
and
in
the
the
bureaucracy
system,
in the system.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Now what the parents want, and so that's I just love what IKEA is doing in the with your work, because you are a parent, you're a mom, you're living this every day, and so just keep it up. Thank you for doing this and if we can support how do we support her effort or her work there? Do we just
IKEA, would you give us that? I don't have your card in front of me, so could you help us with?
Do you have a Facebook or any way to follow what you're doing?
I do. Akia McNeary. I'm also the grassroots coordinator for Commonwealth Educational Opportunities. We do have a group on Facebook. I also volunteer with Kentucky Parent Network. So there's different avenues that you all can contact me. My telephone number. You want to put my telephone number on here?
Well, we'll put it on the show afterwards on our social media. But thank you so much. School choice is going to come to this state. It's going to happen,
Yes,
and it's going to happen because of folks like you. So be encouraged. It's moving. It's the best time in history for this to occur because we went through this craziness with COVID, and then we have all these crazy cultural things that are just changing the way we view our school system. If we can't agree what a boy or girl is, we can't have a public school system without accountability like this.
Yeah. And parents ought to be able to send their children to the school that does that right. Akia, I just want to jump in and say thank you so much. It's a pleasure getting to know you, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're watching the station. You can see us on social media, on YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel at Kentucky's Voice, and also Facebook. And so tune us in. You're watching the station. You're watching the station, Kentucky's Conservative Outpost, and tonight's episode is about school choice. And Jim, we just went through a great election here. I think we had some good results in the election, but one of the big issues that can be dealt with our new legislature and new public school system and school board is school choice. This is a huge issue that could really change education for the better. And tonight we have a great guest on the line, Richard Ennis, who's a policy analyst for the Bluegrass Institute. Yeah,
he's our staff education analyst.
That's right. So you work with him on a daily basis, and so Richard, we want to invite you to the program, and thanks for being on. Jim, go ahead and start. Introduce Richard.
Well, also, when you talk about school choice, and Dick, thanks for joining us from Northern Kentucky this evening. But, we're really talking about opportunities for parents, educational opportunities. And I know in the work you've done, you've seen the impact that empowering parents in this way has had. So why don't you talk about what your thoughts are on that and why we need to have those options in Kentucky. A lot of other states, we've seen the impact that school choice has had on improving the education for all students. Public, across the board, it's kind of been a rising tide lifts all the boats, and I think we need to have that rising tide in Kentucky. I know you feel that way too, but you do a lot of work and a lot of analysis of what's happening with our policy and what's happening with our performance. So talk a little bit about that this evening.
I'd be happy to do that, Jim. The school choice issue is probably crucial to reforming what's going on in our regular public schools. The fact is that we've passed a lot of laws here in Kentucky with the aim of trying to make our public schools in the state better. And the education system is just remarkably resistant to change. But when I look at what's going on in some other states, it's very different. Florida, for example, has lots and lots of school choice. And down there, because they have choice, their public education system, the traditional schools in the public education system, are also improving. We looked at that in a report we did back about a year and a half ago called Florida versus Kentucky. And the results for Florida versus Kentucky are starkly different. Florida has made some huge advances in their performance on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is a federal test that measures reading and math performance for 4th and 8th graders, basically on a 2-year cycle. And then we took a look at how Kentucky was doing in the same time period, from the earliest tests that were done by the NAEP in math and reading, and then the most recent ones at the time, which were for 2019. And Florida had made tremendous advances in their relative ranking compared to other states, while Kentucky, not so much. And was still, when you take Kentucky's scores, and especially when you break them out by race, which you really have to do to analyze this national assessment properly, our kids still rank well below the middle, whether we're talking 4th or 8th grade, whether we're talking math or reading, whether we're talking white students against white students, or black students against black students. We're still down in the lower half of performance. And Florida has moved way up. In some cases, they're up around 5th place.
And you're talking about compared to other states and how we're doing here. Dick, talk about Jefferson County, the NAEP, too. That's really a huge issue here, isn't it, to determine whether or not we're making any progress on closing these gaps. What do you see happening with that?
Jefferson County has major problems. And unlike every other school system in the state, we also get a look at Jefferson County using the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's so large that it competes in what's called the Trial Urban District Assessment part of the national assessment. And we have the performance for Jefferson County from 2009 upward, and it's very disappointing, very disappointing. For example, in 4th grade reading for white students, the score in 2022, which was 40% proficient, is not statistically different from the 42% they scored all the way back in 2009. They basically have went up a little bit and then back down again. They actually increased in 2017 up to 51% proficient for whites, but now they're back down to 40%, and the decline is statistically significant. For the black students, though, the real horror comes out. Black students in Jefferson County in 2009 were only 12% proficient in 4th grade reading. Flash forward a decade plus to 2022, and black students are only 13% proficient in 4th grade reading. Basically, a little more than 1 out of 10 black kids in Louisville are being taught to read adequately, and that's just stunningly bad performance.
So Richard, this is Tom. So, school choice is a broad term. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. And what would be the choices that Kentucky has when it comes to school choice? Because there's lots of variations of it. There's lots of flavors of that. And so, just what are the different types of school choice that we could even embark upon if we were to do so? And could you frame that out for us?
Basically, in my way of thinking, there's 3 primary types of school choice that result in extra assistance to parents with lower income levels so that they will have the choice that wealthy parents really already have. A wealthy parent can afford to send their child to a private school in Kentucky right now, but there aren't very many parents who are in that position. The first thing is what are called charter schools. And charter schools are alternative public schools. They are public schools, they're publicly funded, but they're governed differently. And often they will set up to even focus on special groups of children. There are charter schools that maybe set up to focus specifically on kids with learning disabilities, or they may concentrate on working with children in disadvantaged parts of the cities and so forth. And then there's what are called vouchers, and vouchers are tax-funded scholarships that students can apply for, and they get money paid to them directly by the state so they can go to a private school. Unfortunately for us, we have a part of our Kentucky Constitution that makes vouchers currently illegal. Now, that may change going forward because of possible action at the federal level. That restriction in Kentucky's Constitution is loosely referred to as a Blaine Amendment, and a number of states have a similar type of thing in their constitutions. And the U.S. Supreme Court may be ruling on Blaine amendments, and they may do it in a way that will outlaw the amendment in Kentucky's Constitution, which would open up vouchers here, but currently they're illegal. The third way is tuition tax credit scholarships. And we actually had a bill that was passed 2 years ago that made tuition tax scholarships possible in Kentucky. Unfortunately, the enemies of school choice immediately tied that bill up in the Kentucky court system, and it's currently at the Supreme Court level where it has not yet been decided on. The way this works is different from having tax money pay for the scholarships. Instead, individuals and corporations can make contributions to a 501c private organization, which then turns around and awards that money to students as scholarships. The money that goes into this program gets the donor a tax credit on their Kentucky state income taxes, hence it's a tuition tax credit scholarship. And we believe at the Bluegrass Institute this should be legal. We'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court decides and then go from there. But that would allow Kentucky students of low to modest means to have the option to go to a private school. So those are the three primary areas. There's other things that are school choice as well. For example, homeschooling is a school choice option, and that's fairly open in Kentucky, but parents have to be prepared to do that type of schooling, and not every parent is cut out to be a successful homeschool parent, although the ones that do it generally do it very well, and those students are often now sought after both by the college systems and even the military because they turn out to be pretty good performers.
You know, Dick, in the charter school arena, we've seen a lot in terms of closing gaps, haven't we? I think that's been one of the areas we've seen some of the most success in with charter schools. Could you, with that option, which is a public school, parents choose a different public school is what they choose when they choose a charter school. But there's been some success in closing these gaps that we haven't seen in other experiments by the education system or other policy or programs.
That's exactly right, Jim. One of the things that I have been tracking for several years now is an unusual development that is also part of the NAEP Trial Urban District Assessment portion, and that is the ability to take a look in a couple of cities that have robust charter school programs and compare the performance for Black students in those city charter school systems to the performance of Black students in the traditional schools in the same city. It's about as close to an apples to apples comparison as we can get with the NAEP data. And Atlanta is the big winner in this. Atlanta, for several cycles, has shown that it has statistically significantly higher scores for its Black kids who are in the charter schools as opposed to the Black kids that are in the traditional Atlanta public school system. In general, over the last couple of cycles, the difference in scores has run between 10 and 20 points on the NAEP scale score system, which runs from 0 to 500. A 10-point difference on that scale is roughly considered to be about an extra year of learning.
And Dick, these are kids from the same backgrounds, right? We're not talking about, because a lot of times opponents talk about that school choice skims the best students off the top, or this is a true apples to apples comparison when it comes to the neighborhoods the kids are coming from, the socioeconomic status, and those types of background issues.
As close as I can determine, Jim, that's exactly the case. Cleveland, by the way, also, and this is in a state which is not generally regarded to have a strong charter school system, but Cleveland has also demonstrated in the past NAEP performance differences for its black students between the charter schools and the traditional schools of around 10 points as well. They didn't quite do that well this time. But one of the problems we've got with the 2022 NAEP data is a technical issue because they reduced the number of students they picked to test.
Because of COVID, right? Due to COVID.
Well, partly COVID, but mostly because they wanted to save money.
Yeah, well,
and it was an unfortunate decision because it runs the statistical sampling error in the NAEP results up. And because of that, it requires an even bigger score differential before you can declare statistical significance.
And Dick, on the NAEP, that is the nation's report card. When you hear NAEP, that's the National National Assessment of Educational Progress. That is when you hear the nation's report card, that's telling us how our students are performing, and especially in the larger districts like Jefferson County, where it's really helping us demonstrate, I think, a need for more options, especially for lower income families.
That's right, Jim. It is billed as the nation's report card. And right now, it's about the only data that we can look at in Kentucky from before COVID to the current period and have a test that's been consistently given. The problem we have with Kentucky state tests is it's been changed. Up through 2019, it was called KPRAP. But starting in 2021, after a one-year break where they didn't do any testing because of COVID, they've now changed to something called the Kentucky Summative Assessment. And the Kentucky Department of Education has been adamant that you cannot compare the scores from the new test to the ones from the old test. So right at the time we needed some consistency, Kentucky's state testing program doesn't have it for us. But the NAEP does, and also ACT does. And we've looked at that as well. And the ACT is also showing some disturbing declines in performance in Kentucky.
And also, folks can look at more, if they want to know more about this, they can go to our website at bips.org, and Dick does a lot of blogging on there about and updating of these issues. On the ACT, I would just quickly here, as we're running out of time, but the ACT is important, Dick, because it indicates college and career readiness, and it's telling us similar stories. I think the important thing is it's telling us a similar story about how Kentucky students are performing versus the state results, which tend to be inflated and offer a rosier picture than what is really happening.
That's been true throughout the testing system's history in Kentucky, and it's definitely true currently as well. I've only taken a very quick preliminary look at the 2022 results from the state test compared to the NAEP 4th and 8th grade math and reading results. But in general, the state test is telling us about 15% more kids are proficient than what the NAEP is showing. There was one area, I think it was 4th grade math, where they were a little closer together, but they're not the same. And so the important thing is that the NAEP does agree very closely with testing results we have in Kentucky from two different products from ACT. One is the ACT college entrance test, and the other is a test we used up until 2015 with 8th graders called the Explore test. And both ACT tests give us benchmark information about the kids who are on track to be ready for college and careers when they graduate from high school. The NAEP percentage proficient rates are very close in every case I've looked at, very close to the rates that ACT says are what are needed to be on track for college and careers. So we need to keep that in mind, which means that Kentucky's state testing, again, is a too rosy a picture.
So Richard, I think the key takeaway is if you really do care about education, if you care about public schools and how they educate people, as well as private schools and as well as just education in general, then you should be for school choice because it improves every system that we have. And so, key question we're actually over time, but I want to get a quick answer to this. Who would be against this?
Well, unfortunately, there is a staunch group of naysayers and opponents. The teachers union is probably the most prominent group against school choice. And they're definitely afraid, I think, for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're afraid that the public school systems will be shown up as not performing nearly as well as they could if parents start getting school choice and put their kids in private school and then find out, oh my goodness, my kid is doing much better. So that's one thing that really concerns them. And they view every tax dollar spent on education as theirs, not the child's, theirs. And they just greedily go after every single dollar they can get. And that's not in the best interest of kids, but it creates a big financial inducement for the unions to be against school choice.
Yeah, so it's very self-serving that the unions would be against this. So, well, Richard, thanks for being on the show tonight. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your work on this topic. Continue that great work. And I think we're going to see school choice in Kentucky very soon, either with this next term or with the next governor. I think we'll probably get a Republican governor next time. I'm feeling optimistic about it. We have a good slate of candidates, and I think every one of them have school choice as the top of their list of things they want to do.
You know, Dick, the work that Dick's doing is so important because getting that sound research that is really indisputable and airtight really shuts the door. The other side likes to fudge with the facts, we might say.
That's
and
right.
so I think having that, that's an understatement, but having that available, Dick, thanks. Again, thank you for your great work, and you're helping us make a strong case for more freedom for parents, educational freedom and liberty for parents and families in Kentucky. It's going to be a huge win. We're going to get it.
It's huge. If you want to follow their work, both Richard and Jim's work, Bluegrass Institute, go online, and they're doing some of the great policy writing and thinking in this state, and we appreciate your work. And so, okay, you're watching the station, and you can also watch us on YouTube, Facebook, all the social media platforms. We'll be on Getter soon, probably some of the others, but you're watching the station, Kentucky's Conservative Outpost.
Most monopolies went away a long time ago. When it comes to goods and services, Americans want choices. Eliminating monopolies has not only resulted in options, it's lowered costs and improved products. The same thing could happen if we got rid of the monopoly which dictates where children attend school. Most K-12 students in Kentucky assign schools by nameless, faceless bureaucrats at the top-heavy central office. Those who benefit from this monopoly work hard to convince taxpayers and citizens that allowing students to attend schools that work better for them will somehow destroy the public education and usher in educational Armageddon. But school choice has been around in America for more than 30 years. Today, more than 3 million American children attend 7,000 public charter schools in 44 states and the District of Columbia. 30 states offer parents the opportunity to obtain funding to enroll their children in a private or faith-based school. Not only has public education not been harmed in these states, there's undeniable evidence that more choices for parents have actually forced public schools to improve their academic performance and create a rising tide that indeed lifts all boats. Imagine being forced to buy all your groceries at a bureaucratically assigned, government-owned and run grocery store and not being allowed to shop at another store, even if it was closer, had better products, and more of what you needed. Kentuckians wouldn't endure such nonsense when it comes to where we live or buy our groceries, cars, or clothes, or anything else for that matter. Neither should we tolerate it when it comes to our children's education. Thanks for watching.